Thank you very much for making time to talk to me for the Fizzy vlog series today.
Absolute pleasure, Micaela. Good to be here.
Dan, you've been the Victorian Disability Worker Registration Scheme Commissioner, that's a mouthful, since October last year, October 2019.
Yeah.
And prior to that, about 10 years in leadership roles in the community legal sector, including the most immediate past role as the CEO at Inner Melbourne Community Legal Centre. And prior to that, the Executive Director at the ACT Council of Social Services. When I was doing what everybody does, when I saw the announcement about your appointment and I Googled you, I was really pleased to see that connection to the social service sector. How long were you at ACT, Cos?
I was there about 5 years, and it's really interesting to, other COS directors or CEOs, pop up and you find out where people have gone and been and everything. It's such an amazing privilege of a job to have that coverage of a community sector. And then where people take that, I think is also really interesting too.
I agree. It is an extraordinary sector, and you've had quite a few volunteer roles in the community sector as well. Are you still the president of the Australian Pacific Island Disability Support Organisation?
No, I've finished that a couple of years ago, but I've had a number of different sort of board and organisational involvement in mainly the disability advocacy sector, really the consumer sector and the disability scene, which is my great passion, if you like.
Yeah. So ideally, kind of set you up for this role.
Yeah, I think so.
So Dan, what I wanted to start off asking you about is you started the role to set up the worker registration scheme at the end of last year, and what 2020 has turned out to be will, like all the rest of us, will not have been at all what you were planning. How has it impacted on the establishment of the Commission, both for you and your team personally and professionally?
Oh my God, Micaela, this year has, everyone would say this year has turned out to be completely different to the way any of us expected.
Yeah.
And on a personal level, this year at the beginning in March, when we're all having to suddenly work from home and move into that sort of first phase of lockdown, I moved in with my partner and her two boys, who she has half-time, and that's been an amazing thing. I've had an amazingly good year. I'm incredibly fortunate, and the remote working and COVID and everything has certainly thrown up its own challenges. But on a personal level, I've been absolutely blessed this year. On the work side of things, and as the Victorian Disability Worker Commission, or the Victorian Disability Worker Commissioner, I started in the role, as you say, at the end of October last year, and it was that time we spent designing the commission, working out what it would do and how it would do it, and the structure and recruitment. And then we're partway through that, and then suddenly, in March, where we're all, flung to corners of the city where we all have to stay at home and everything. And my main recollection is how quickly and capably all the people that I worked with were able to just quickly snap to working from home and be incredibly focused on the job still. I had this amazing team that I'd started to build, and also some people that were involved from before I started as the sort of establishment crew, the implementation team. And it worked incredibly well. People just continued to be really focused on the work. Recruiting remotely and designing an organisation and developing all sorts of how to work, policy and procedure manuals remotely was all possible, but it all just takes longer. Everything at the moment feels like it takes longer, and it's just that bit harder, right? And it takes that more energy, I think, to do things by Zoom or Teams. And there's a whole lot of leadership challenges in there, I think, with working with people and bringing people along and building a new organisation. And so I felt a bit confronted by the process of building a new organisation. And in some ways, because I felt a bit confronted about that, that's also been some of the most rewarding parts. I'm not saying we haven't had a few sort of challenges and hiccups along the way, but we've managed to attract a range of people from diverse experience and backgrounds, including a range of people with disabilities to work for the Commission. And at the moment, I think we're sitting at about 30% of our staff have disabilities. And all these people and their ability to contribute in different ways is emerging in everything we do. So I feel quite energised by it. Although on a day-to-day basis, there are days when it just feels just damn hard. There's a lot going on. It's incredibly challenging. So there's a need to sometimes change the way you work and change the way you sort of bring people along in the journey too. For myself and for other people, depending on where they're at, everyone sort of goes through ups and downs in this process, I think.
Yeah, my observation would be, Dan, that there's somebody in the team, any kind of given moment, who is struggling with something, either personally or professionally, because of the impact of the pandemic. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today about it's very levelling. It's very levelling in terms of it's impacting on all of us, in everybody, in very different ways. Some people clearly much more significantly, and without having the advantages that, as you say, lots of us have, it has a much more significant impact. And that's part of the role of the Commission, is to kind of understand and see into some of that around what's going on for this particular workforce. What are your hopes about the Commission's value to the disability sector?
My hope and my intention, I guess, is that really that there's a need for us to regulate in a way where we obviously identify and find bad practice and abuse and neglect and deal with that swiftly and directly. And we know it exists, and we're seeing it in the news from time to time, and we'd be naive to think it doesn't exist in Victoria. Not just to think about that across Victoria, but I want to make sure that we get to the people who are the most isolated and the most vulnerable, because there are so many people with disabilities in Victoria who are without much contact with general community and don't enjoy much in the way of participation. That's partly due to the nature of their disability, but also partly due to the nature of their own sort of networks and family and things like that. And really what we'd like to see, and what I'd like to see as good practice disability services, is where disability workers are really able to more and more assist all people with disabilities to have the maximum amount of participation in community. And in many ways, that's how we reduce neglect and abuse, by ensuring the greatest amount of participation. When people are isolated and when people are vulnerable, then that's the highest risk setting. So to get to those people is something we want to make sure we do as a regulator that maybe has to investigate and take action against certain workers. But also there's the positive registration side of our scheme, where we promote good practice and promote high quality disability services. We want to sort of start to be able to talk about what that looks like. And in many ways, one of the things that is about promoting all sorts of participation in every way we can for people with disabilities.
And Dan, I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about what I'm observing at the moment, about how people are at this time adapting in the way that they ensure that people's voices are heard. Because I think it's a real risk in the environment that we're in, where people are increasingly isolated, as you've described, and decisions are being made at pace in crisis mode, completely understandably. It's not easy to ensure that people who have high degrees of vulnerability, the space is created for their voices to be heard.
If you're already isolated and vulnerable, then you are more isolated and vulnerable than ever now. unfortunately, and that's what worries us at the Commission. And
Mm.
it's our biggest challenge. I don't pretend that we've got some easy way to make sure that we can reach out to all those people. There's many, many ways of doing that. It's a massive challenge for us, and it's harder now than ever.
Yeah, it is. It is, Dan. So I wish you all the best with continuing to develop the strategies around that. And Fizzy and I know the rest of the community sector are really keen to engage in those conversations with you as they emerge. So looking forward to an ongoing conversation about this.
Yeah, really look forward to it. No, I really look forward to further developing my relationship with the whole Victorian community sector in a way, because I think almost all of the Victorian community sector has a role to play in improving the quality, the safety and the empowerment of people with disabilities right across the state.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Thank you very much for your time today, Dan.
Thanks, Micaela. Absolute pleasure.